Hey y'all, Tanny Cooks here, and today I'm going to show you how to make an absolutely delicious and juicy jerk Cornish game hen. Y'all, it is so flavorful. So we're going to season up these game hens with a lot of aromatics, garlic, onion, bell pepper, and I'm going to show you how to truss your Cornish game hens without any string. This is a game changer, so stay tuned and let's get to cooking. To start off with, I'm going to prep my 2 heads of green cabbage. I'm just washing them in a big bowl of water and white vinegar. And then I'm going to rinse them off and set them to the side while I prep my Cornish game hen. This cabbage is going to be awesome. So let's look at the seasonings for our hen. We're going to use olive oil, sea salt, poultry seasoning, garlic powder, onion powder, jerk seasoning. Now, this Caribbean jerk seasoning is a dry seasoning made by McCormick. The specific ingredients aren't listed in detail, but I know it contains allspice and nutmeg, and I like to kick up those flavors a little bit more. So I have the small containers of allspice ground and nutmeg. I'm also adding thyme leaves as well as the bell peppers, onions, and garlic. So this is going to be very flavorful. I like to buy the Tyson brand Cornish hen. I've purchased another brand before, but the leg was always broken, but I won't say the brand. Maybe it was just a fluke at my store. So I'm going to unwrap my Cornish game hen and then wash it. So I'm putting it in a bowl of cold water, and I'm cooking 2 Cornish game hens. So I'm just going to rinse them off. And you want to look inside the bottom cavity to pull out anything that might be inside of it, any extra flaps of skin. Just make sure the inside is rinsed out as well as the outside. Now, if you watch my videos, you know I clean my meat and vegetables with white vinegar. You could also use lemon or lime, but I like to use it. It's my personal preference, and you can already see pieces of the extra skin floating in the water. So I'll let this soak for maybe about 5 or 10 minutes. I dry them off with a paper towel and set them to the side. So now I'm ready to start prepping my bell peppers. Now, you will notice my vegetables, raw vegetables, are close to my raw hen, and typically you don't want to do this, so don't do this, but I'm doing it because I'm literally cooking these vegetables with my hen, and it was just for me, so it's okay. So just cut up your bell peppers. I'm using red and orange, but if you like green, you can certainly use that. I find that the green bell peppers have a slightly different flavor than the red and yellow and orange, but you could use what your preference is. I definitely like the way the colors look with using a variety of bell pepper colors. So I'm cutting my bell peppers into medium-sized slivers, but again, you can cut them to the size that you prefer, either big or small. I'm also using a red onion. I'm going to use this whole medium red onion, and I'm just going to cut it into a similar size and shape as my bell peppers. So hopefully the vegetables all cook evenly. We're going to cook our Cornish game hens in the oven at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes to an hour. So that would be plenty of time for our vegetables cut this size to cook down and to get very soft and intensify their naturally sweet flavor. I'm also cooking garlic. So the amount of garlic, fresh garlic you use is up to your personal preference. I'm using about 6 or 7 big cloves. I'm also going to use garlic powder, so if you don't like garlic as much, maybe you can use 1 clove or you can leave it out altogether. But for 2 hens, I'm using several big pieces. So I just smashed the garlic cloves with a wide knife, and then I peel it, and then I just cut it down. It doesn't matter if you cut your garlic perfectly. It's really not that serious. It's going to cook down and add delicious flavor to our dish. So just cut your vegetables without cutting yourself. That's the most important thing, really. And there we have our delicious vegetables and my Cornish hen that I'm just making sure is extra dry. So now that our vegetables are chopped, the next step is to prep our Cornish hens. And one thing I like to do is truss, T-R-U-S-S, the legs together. I also like to fold the wings underneath it. So I did the first one already, so now I'm going to show you how to do it with my second bird. So it's easiest for me to do it by making sure my bird is very dry, especially when using a knife so the knife doesn't slip. What you want to do is cross one leg over to the opposite side into a hole, into that flap of skin, and we're just going to put the opposite side leg into that hole. So I use my knife, and I kind of stretch my leg over and the skin over a couple of times before I make the hole to get an idea of the best place. You don't want your hole to be too big because you don't want it to just rip completely open. So it should just be big enough for your fingertip to fit through. And then you can squeeze the leg from the opposite side into the flap on the other side of the chicken. So the left leg is squeezing into the right hole of the Cornish hen. And so we're going to do the same thing with the right leg to the left side. And you can decide if you want the second leg to cross over or under. Just do what feels most comfortable for you. And then hold the flap open wide and cut a slit in it with a small paring knife so that hopefully you get a small hole. And it might take you doing this on a few birds before you get it perfectly done. Either way, the bird will be delicious, but I find that this helps hold in the aromatics that we're going to add, and it helps the bird to cook more evenly. And I like the presentation of it on the plate like this. So look at that. Beautifully trussed without using any rope or whatever stuff people use to tie up their Cornish birds. Some people might use wooden sticks or chopsticks, something similar to that, but you can bypass all of that and just use my technique to truss it without anything else but the skin. So now I have a 13x9 pan, which is a perfect size for 2 Cornish game hens. I added a little bit of olive oil, maybe 3 tablespoons at the bottom. That's going to help the vegetables roast and be coated. So I added some of the bell peppers and some of the onions to the bottom. Now you'll notice here that I am untying my trussed birds because we're going to season the outside and inside of the birds and add some of our onions and bell peppers inside the bird. But you'll notice now I'm adding olive oil to the bird, and it's easier for me to cut the holes in it while the bird is drier. So I do it before I add the olive oil. Now, you can do your food however you want to. I'm just showing you what works best for me. So I'm adding olive oil to the outside and inside of the bird. And the same with the seasoning. I'm rubbing it on the outside, I'm rubbing it on the inside, and I'm also rubbing the seasoning underneath the skin so that the meat underneath the skin gets seasoned and not just the outside skin. I'm using the dried seasonings that I showed you in the beginning of the video. Onion powder, garlic powder. I'm also adding more olive oil if it looks like it's going to be a little dry from the seasonings because I don't want my seasonings to burn. I also add liquid smoke, and that adds flavor, but it also helps the bird to brown nicely. So with a gloved hand, massage in the seasonings and the oil on the top and bottom of the bird as well as the inside. You can add more of any seasoning that you want. Just be aware that as you add dried seasonings, you may need to add more olive oil or spray oil on top of the dried seasonings just so they don't burn from cooking in the oven for 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm just adding it on the back side now. So you can see with adding all of this stuff why it's easier for me to cut the slits to truss it first and then season it. But again, do what you like. So look at all of this chopped garlic inside, y'all. It is so delicious and it smells amazing already. These vegetables will release some natural liquid, so that natural liquid from the onions and the bell peppers will also help season the inside of the bird. So you definitely don't want to skip this step. Whenever I cook a chicken or a hen, I always add vegetables on the inside. You could also add celery, you could add onions. It's just a variety. But sometimes I add cut lemon or lime wedges to the inside. If you have fresh lime, you could certainly do a wedge of fresh lime on the inside of each bird, but I don't have any with me. So I'm going to show you what I do at the end of this video to get that lime flavor. So now that my birds are all seasoned, I am just adding the legs back into their respective holes so that the bird is trussed. And look at that, y'all. Look at how beautiful that looks already. And take your time. If one of the holes bust open, it's okay. It'll still taste good. It may take a few birds to get it exactly right, as I mentioned before. Dry seasonings on top, so I did spray it with a little bit of olive oil, then pop it in the oven for 350 degrees for 45 minutes to an hour. Check it halfway through to make sure it's not burning and turn it as needed to make sure it cooks evenly. So in another 13x9 pan, I am adding 3 or 4 tablespoons of olive oil, and now I am chopping up my cabbage. I want to note that I did wash my hands in my work area carefully, so this is a whole new cutting board, knife, and pan before I'm cooking my cabbage after I've been handling the raw poultry. So being clean and safe is the most important thing when cooking. So you can cut your cabbage into the size and shape that you like. I'm cutting it into long strips and then turning those strips sideways to cut them into medium fork-sized squares. That's how I like it. If you cut your cabbage so it's very thin, like shaved, then that may reduce the amount of time it takes to cook in the oven. So you'll just want to watch your food as it cooks in the oven. So maybe every 10 minutes or halfway through the cooking time, check your oven to see if any part of your cabbage is burning or get too charred. You can move it around or stir it with a big spoon. Green cabbage has so many health properties, and I find that roasting it in the oven with these seasonings that I'm going to show you and the olive oil make it so I don't need bacon to cook delicious cabbage anymore. In fact, I never use bacon. I'm getting away from using processed meat anyway, and this recipe is so delicious. I eat it several times a week, and I make this cabbage with no meat. So you can see the seasoning I'm adding include garlic powder, onion, or granulated garlic, granulated onion, sea salt, black pepper, complete seasoning, and you're going to add maybe a tablespoon or two to begin with. It's really up to your personal taste. I sprinkle my seasonings without measuring it. You can absolutely taste a piece of this after you add your seasonings because people do eat raw cabbage a la coleslaw. So taste a piece and see how it tastes to you and see if you need to add any more seasoning. I go light on the salt because I like to add salt at the end of the cooking process to be sure that I don't add too much. You can certainly add a little bit more salt at the end, but it's harder to fix it if you add too much in the beginning. Now, the key seasoning for this is the poultry seasoning. Do not leave that out. Add a good 1 or 2 tablespoons. I happen to have a jar of canned pimentos, jarred pimentos in my refrigerator, so I drained them and just put the pimentos in here. It's a nice pop of color. I don't find pimentos to have a huge amount of flavor, but I do like the color, and it's a texture difference. So our vegetables, our cabbage are prepped, and we're going to stick it in the oven and let it roast for about 20 to 30 minutes at 350 degrees, the same temp we're cooking our Cornish game hens in, but be sure to stir it halfway through to make sure it evenly chars on all sides. Look how delicious it looks. It's so tender and flavorful, and you'll notice how much the cabbage shrunk down. Our beautiful hens have finished or out of the oven. Notice the truss stayed perfectly for a beautiful presentation. Cooking 2 of these at 350 degrees Fahrenheit will take about 45 minutes in total. At 20 minutes, rotate the pan in the oven to allow it to cook more evenly. At 30 minutes, you want to check the temperature to see how close it is to 160. You want to take this out the oven at 160 degrees so that it can rest for 5 minutes and then come up to 165. Mine went a little bit over to 170, but that's okay. Notice I'm using squirt lime juice because I didn't have the fresh kind. And this is some roasted cabbage. And then in the top corner is that beautiful creamed collard greens left over from the day before. Stay tuned to my channel. Tomorrow I'm going to show you how to make it, and you'll see how beautiful it is when it is creamy and hot right out of the oven. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel.